there and welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth today. Thanks for joining me. This is part 3 in the series about arrows on the birth chart. Now, as previously stated, nothing can be read with numerology as a standalone, so we wouldn't basically make an assessment of a person or their personality based on what we see on the charts, and this includes with the arrows. So please do watch the other videos, because this is, when I say it's part of a series, this is the equivalent of attending a numerology workshop and learning how to do numerology, and there's a lot involved with it. So yes, there are a lot of videos, there is a lot of hours, and what I tend to do is give you my experience and understanding and interpretations of numbers and how I put together numerology reports. And this way, if you were to look at the entire series, you would be able to do your own numerology reports for yourself and your family. And it would certainly provide a lot of understanding, if not revelations, for you. So without further ado, let's kick on. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the arrow of the planner, the arrow of will, the arrow, if I can speak, the arrow of disorder, and the arrow of poor memory. And what I've done to make it easier for you is I've actually put on here the code numbers for the videos in the playlist for the other arrows, the ones that we've already discussed. So if there's an arrow that you're specifically interested in knowing the meaning of, all you have to do is go to the numerology playlist and enter in the serial number like S1E8.3, and that will pull up the video for you. And just a reminder, if you like the content or anything that I put across here, do feel free to, I ask, please, that you make a comment, or that you like the video, and just let me know that it's stuff that you enjoy, because that helps me, and it helps me to remain motivated, but it also helps me with the YouTube algorithm. And I need to have a little bit of feedback every now and again as a human being to remind me to soldier on and to keep putting this content up for you. Anyway, without further ado, let's go and take a look at the arrows. Thanks very much. So the arrow of the planner passes through or occurs when the person has got the numbers 1, 2, and 3 on their birth chart, as you can see by this birth chart here. Now, the people with this arrow, generally speaking, if I can get the words out, they tend to have an inherent love of order and method, hence it's called the arrow of the planner. They're very good at planning, and this is about the achievement of goals. They don't necessarily carry the goals to completion on their own. I hope you didn't hear that loud motor go roaring past just then. If you did, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, they don't necessarily carry the goals through to completion themselves. They're not necessarily the active person. What they are is the planner. Their strengths lie in not necessarily finding the solution to problems, but planning the steps to achieving the goal. And what this looks like is, they might be in a conversation with a person, and the person turns around and says to them, I've got a really good idea and I think this would be great, but I've no idea how we're going to make this happen. The person with the arrow of the planner is going to turn around and probably think about it for a bit, and then come back and say, well, actually, this is how we would achieve that goal, and these are the steps we need to take. And generally it needs to be done in a bit by bit. Anyway, they would be the project managers of the world, mapping it out for other people to do the activities. And this is because not only do they work out the phases and stages for completion, they're actually able to identify what skills are needed to bring the project to be manifest. They will work out where they need to go to get the people and the resources. And it could even be, if they're a planner, it might not even be resourcing all these things themselves, but doing we need to find somebody. So that would be the recruitment. We need to get somebody on board that actually knows where to get all this experience, or where we can gather the resources from. So they're very, they're very proactive. They're certainly, you would want them on your side if you were going to be attempting to manifest anything particular. However, with all of these arrows, as I say and have said repeatedly, there is guidance and information that comes through for people, whether it's you or whether you're the parent of a child that has got the arrow of planner or any arrow. There's a little bit of guidance that comes through. So with the arrow of the planner, they have to be very guarded against becoming lazy, because there is a potential for the person with the arrow of the planner not to pay attention to the practical details when implementing. So where I said that, the arrow of the planner, they can go into this detail, if they become lazy or sloppy, then they're going to actually not be as effective as they could be. So this talks about the potential. When we talk about, or the first part of the information I gave, this is the potential for them. But if they become lazy, they're not going to achieve their potential. The same with all of us, really. And the other thing that might block them from achieving their desired goals is when they start to think that the details are trivial. And by this, I mean, let's say that I mentioned before that the person who has got the arrow of the planner has the capacity to actually establish that, well, we'll need to have these materials, we'll need to have this skill and that kind of thing. If they think it's not important and they don't apply due diligence, shall we say, to finding somebody with the capacity to gain these particular resources, then of course that is going to undermine their efforts as well. Another thing that might act as a barrier for them is because sometimes they can actually become so caught up with the detail and deeply embedded in their mind, because this is, although it's a mind, spirit, body arrow, there's a lot of thought that's involved with the methodology and order. They can forget about giving this spontaneous appreciation and consideration of people's feelings when there is a conflict. So that could be when you're negotiating, or when they are negotiating the means to the end, where they run ramshot over other people's feelings because they have to have this methodology and order. And I would probably go as far as saying that, there's a real risk actually that they don't cope with disorder particularly well if their routine is thrown out of whack, or the curveballs come in. They may struggle with that. Now, if you have this arrow as a child, you may have experienced nervous restlessness because you were spending too much time in your early years basically in your head and not knowing how to translate these ideas and what's going on inside your thought processing into the physical action. Now, so the guidance there for parents would be that if you've got a child with this, to make sure that they really get that balance happening, that they're not left to just think in their mind, that they're encouraged to articulate and express their feelings and their thoughts, and to assist them to basically do the give and take within a conversation, to be able to listen to and respond to people effectively. Just as an interesting point, I like to put on, as you're aware if you've watched the other videos, people that have got the specific arrows in their birth charts. Now, Lech Valenza, I think is how you pronounce his name, he had the arrow of the planner. And I find it quite interesting myself that the two people that I've managed to pull out that have got an arrow of the planner actually are quite well known for their political contributions, shall we say. Whether or not we agree with their political careers, these two men actually have gone down in history. Lech, I'm not even sure how to explain it. Basically, Poland, of course, was under Russian and communist rule after World War II, and Lech and his party, they were responsible, I guess, for liberating Poland, would probably be the best way of describing it. I remember when it happened because I was young enough to actually meet Polish people that came to Australia after Poland had been liberated. I didn't meet a lot of them, but I remember it was a really big deal at the time. Mao Zedong, of course, he has not only the arrow of the planner, he had the arrow of the intellect. Now, he certainly, let's be real, he certainly made a massive difference within China, but I guess without speculating and going into the history books too much, because once again, of course, we're talking about communist countries, and I live in a democratic country, always have. And so there's limited information that comes to us as to what happens within these countries. But from what I understand, that through the years of Mao Zedong, there was actually some really harsh years for the Chinese people where there were some big mistakes made. And I guess that's where the caution of guarding against complacency and not paying attention to the detail is a real warning for people, because although he's got the arrow of the intellect, what I understand is that they made some very foolhardy decisions, as in China, they needed to have wood to make the fires and the furnaces to make weapons and that kind of thing. And what they did, they actually deforested the country, and that led to problems, not only of starvation. They ended up going through a starvation, as far as I know, in China. There was lots and lots of terrible things for the people of China during those early years, from what I understand. But if you know more about it, let me know. Make a comment. I'm just making the point here that, yeah, we've got two very well-known political figures with an arrow of the planner, and they achieved success. Mount Look, I haven't spoken to enough Chinese people. In fact, I've spoken to none to ask them their viewpoints of the Mao Zedong years. But I'm not sure it was a barrel of laughs. I'll leave it at that. So the arrow of will is where we've got the numbers 4, 5, and 6, and you can see that obviously on the chart here. Now, it does obviously refer to the capacity to assert will and power, and it also indicates, sorry to say this, that people with this number, if that's you, you would have been quite a difficult child to raise, as this pathway of learning is asserting the will in healthy and positive ways. And the only way we learn to do things healthily, of course, is to test and try out and challenge and see how it rolls. The healthy use of this will, though, is one that is powerful, that's balanced, and it refers to the Kundalini force of nature. And the Kundalini force of nature runs up and down your spine, if you're not aware of it. It's not uncommon that people with this arrow will ignore, just through sheer determination and their will, to pay attention to their intuitive hunches and, those intuitive guidance. And they might be giving it to other people, but they will rarely actually pay attention to it themselves. Just a thought to take on board, if that's you. So consequently, where I'm going with this is the arrow of willpower is rarely embraced. Not most people tend to ignore it. Success is achieved for them when they apply balance to all aspects of their lives, and that, of course, is mind, body, and spirit. And it's this balance that gives the person the courage and strength to shift through any of the adversity that they encounter throughout their day-to-day living. I think the thing with this is that it was extremely difficult to find anybody that actually is famous and has the arrow of will, which just supports basically that few people will actually grab a hold of it. But what I did find interesting is that the only one that I did find was actually Galileo, whatever his name is, however you pronounce it, who was a scientist, and I think he was involved in astronomy and that kind of thing. So clearly, I would imagine if we did his entire birth chart, I've put his birth date there, that we will find other influencing factors for him that may have allowed him to harness the power of his will. And just at a glance, looking at his birth date, I can see that being an Aquarius, yes, that's quite possibly what has given him the courage and strength, because of course Aquarius generally are connected to spirit if they embrace it. So there's the influence of his astro as well as this arrow on his birth chart. So the arrow of disorder is worth a mention, and as you can see here, it is the absence of the numbers 1, 4, and 7. This means that there is no numbers on the physical plane for them, and that anybody that is born with the arrow of disorder is focused on spiritual stuff, their feelings, and their head, if they're lucky, if they've got a balance there. But certainly they're going to have the bulk of their numbers on one or the other. I don't really think that you're going to see somebody with too much balance across those two planes. So if you've been wondering what's been going on since year 2000, it's probably every possibility that these people that we're interacting with that make us all question and scratch ourselves and that kind of thing, that these are actually people with the arrow of disorder. And to put it politely, what we're talking about is if they've got the arrow disorder, then the person can lapse into a lifetime of theory and thinking and an inability to translate. Well, certainly inability until they realise they've got to put some effort in to translate their thoughts into action. And this obviously is going to leave them feeling unfulfilled. So people with this number, and it's a shame that a lot of people, I guess, from the year 2000, the parents of the children that have come in since that time frame, potentially weren't aware of what they could be doing to support their children. And because we are obviously in a generation of young adults who spend more time indoors, remember, and generally on their computers or playing their computer games than actually getting out there and getting physical. That all ties in with actually what's happening with the birth chart here. They just don't have that same balance on their charts that we might have had in the 1900s. Throughout the 1900s. But let's be real, okay? So I don't want to make comparisons about the people that are born in the 21st century and the people that are born in the 20th, because in the 20th century, it was a bunch of warmongers, okay? They had a lot of nines in their birth numbers, and that is the number of the warrior. So we've gone from one extreme to the other as far as centuries go and numbers go, because we're at a new stage, a new beginning. So anyway, going back to it, if people have got the arrow of disorder, they need to be taught from a very early age how to get their act together. And this includes how to organise, how to plan, so that they can actually achieve some goals, because they're very good at thinking at the things, and they're certainly very good at looking at their feelings. How do I feel? So then it's about completing the goals so that they can feel joy about manifesting tangible results. And really, as parents, it's really important that we start working with these kids in that direction, basically as soon as they can walk, to really get them actively involved with practical games. And this could be doing things like the garden and the housework, getting them to help out. Also, one of the things that parents might need to understand with these children as well is that rewards need to be more than verbal. Verbal expression of appreciation is a good thing for them, obviously, but at the same time, because they have this need to have this balanced understanding of both the emotional and material worlds, then there needs to be emotional and material rewards as well, as part of helping them to become balanced within themselves. And they should also be encouraged to participate in non-competitive exercise and sports. And this, of course, should be commenced when they start attending school. So, yes, these, I believe, reflect some of the challenges we're now looking at in the years of 2025. Certainly, if we look at what's happening across the mainstream media or whatever, with this focus on people's feelings and being sensitive towards each other. And at the same time, you've got the older generations, perhaps such as myself, turning around and saying, but that's completely irrational and illogical and it's absolutely not practical. Yes, we respect the fact that you've got feelings and emotions, but you've got unreasonable expectations on the rest of the population. I think this is all part of the arrow of disorder, but I'm interested in your feedback and thoughts about it. I would encourage you to actually, if you've got children that were born or grandchildren that were born since the year 2000, because you don't get this arrow last century. because obviously we had a 1, right? There was 1999. There was always a 1 there for the last 100 years. But if you've got grandchildren or children, just start doing some charts and seeing if they've got any arrows. I think it would be really interesting, and feel free to put your comments up. So I've had a bit of fun with this arrow, the arrow of poor memory, and this is an arrow where there's no numbers on the mind plane. Basically, the birth chart is missing the numbers 3, 6, and 9. So what this means is not that a person has no intellectual substance or that they're unable to think. It just means that they're going to struggle to retain information, and they will really have to work. And by work, I mean work hard to keep their memory active. If they allow themselves to become mentally lazy, then their creativity and idealism is going to lose its keenness and its passion. And generally speaking, the arrow is not considered to be a major problem up until about midlife, where, it can basically... Just trying to think how to express this. Basically, what can happen is that the person develops some quite childish traits about themselves, despite the fact that they're a mature adult. And this can be early indicators for them that they're going to advance into a stage of dementia. Now, it should be pointed out, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that the memory problems, or the problems with memory, can actually be counterbalanced, especially if you're the parent of a child that's got the arrow of poor memory, by putting more time in during their formative years, teaching them how to remember things. I'm trying to think. There's some memory games, card games. So it's about training and development and teaching them to basically strengthen their memory powers. So it's certainly possible to do that. We know that. And in fact, there's enough scientific research there to show that, yes, you can develop the neural pathways and this kind of thing. Anyway, we would, as parents, encourage them to use their creative abilities through arts. It could be sensory awareness activities, spending time in nature as part of helping their development as well. And what I found interesting, and basically this is the guidance that's come through with my own literature, is that these young people, young children with the arrow of poor memory, actually should not be attending school before the age of 5. Sometimes people do start their kiddies earlier, but for this particular demographic, it's like, no, hold them back a little bit, let them spend a little bit more time developing before they start school. Now, where I say that I found it funny working with this number, the only famous people that I could find just happened to be Marie Antoinette and Queen Mary, Mary Queen of Scots. And the reason why I say it's funny, it's not really funny actually, is interestingly, both of those women were decapitated. They were executed. Mary Queen of Scots obviously was executed by Queen Elizabeth, and Marie Antoinette, she and her husband were guillotined during the French Revolution. So it's like, well, and they're the only famous people that I can find with an arrow of poor memory. Okay, just some food for thought there. So as you can see, we're getting through these arrows. There is still another 2 videos to go, but we're making some progress here. Hopefully the content that I'm giving you is stuff that you're interested in. Hopefully it has meaning for you, and hopefully you can use it in positive ways in your own life. Once again, I invite you to put your thoughts, your feedback, and your experiences if you've been playing with the numbers and doing some workings out on your own family. Let us know how that rolls for you, because we'd be really interested here. Anyway, for now, I'm going to say thank you for being part of my journey again. Love you, leave you, catch you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.